What's going on, everyone? I hope you are all having a fantastic day. So, as we're all patiently waiting for Washington to decide on the next stimulus package, I've seen a lot of people asking a pretty relevant question, and that is, why doesn't the government simply print more money and send $10,000 checks to everyone? Well, if you've seen any of my past videos, you know that currently the White House and the Senate is largely opposed to another round of direct payments. And that has really angered a lot of people and left them wondering, what is the harm in giving the American people the financial support that they need right now? And that's a great question that deserves a much better answer than, it will cause inflation, that so many economists and even myself have given in the past. So let's break it down and figure out exactly why the government can't just print $10,000 a year for everyone and let us have some of that extra cash. Make sure to subscribe and hit the like button if you do enjoy today's video, and let's jump right into it. So first of all, I just want to say that I'm not trying to take one side or another on whether or not the government should send more direct payments. And like I did say in my last video, I do believe that another round of direct payments is both necessary and will be coming in the next stimulus bill within the next month or so. But I've received so many questions about why can't the government just print more money for all of us, and I know that's something that a lot of people are wondering right now, especially if they're hurting financially. I mean, it sounds like a good idea. Everyone would have the money that they need to buy the necessities and also have extra money for discretionary spending that would help to stimulate the economy even more. Well, in the short term, this kind of makes sense, but if the government actually sent everyone $10,000 or any large amount, we would quickly start to see inflation, which is essentially rising prices. But like I said, this needs a better explanation than it will cause inflation. So you've heard that explanation before, but what does it actually mean? Well, remember that a dollar bill has little to no inherent value and is just a piece of paper that is used as a middleman for trade. The only reason a gas station accepts pieces of paper in exchange for a gallon of gas is that every consumer agrees that that piece of paper is worth a certain amount of goods. So say you were stranded on an island, suddenly your $100 bill has absolutely no worth other than being a dirty piece of toilet paper, while finding food and fresh water has a lot more value in that situation. But why would an influx of money to everyone cause prices to rise? Well, let's take a sports car for example. Right now there is a certain demand for sports cars and a certain supply of cars available, and that is largely what sets the price or number of dollars it takes to get that car. But if everyone gets tons of dollars sent to them, then demand for that sports car would go up since more people are now able to buy it. But supply for that car would remain unchanged in the short term, meaning that the car company would begin charging more for the same car in order to equalize the supply and demand ratio. Essentially, they can charge more for that car now since there are only so many cars that they can sell, and they're going to charge as much as they can since the demand is so high. This is the same reason that brands like Supreme are able to charge so much for a brick with their logo on it, and why something like a Nintendo Switch is currently much more expensive on eBay since the supply has been restricted and the demand has gone up. Okay, but why doesn't that car company just make more cars in order to meet the new level of demand? Well, in theory, that does make sense, but keep in mind that the price of making that car would also go up since parts would cost more, factories to make that car would cost more, and labor costs would go up since workers would require more pay since the cost of goods that they need to buy would also be rising. So in the long term, the supply and demand curves would again equalize at a much higher price for every single good. And now all of that money that the government sent to you could only buy the same amount of stuff as it could before they sent out that money. And I know this might still be a little difficult to wrap your head around since the US has never really experienced hyperinflation, but this is a lot more common than you may think. Just 10 years ago, in 2008, Zimbabwe experienced one of the worst periods of hyperinflation ever seen anywhere in the entire world. Their economic growth started to slow, and their president thought that it would be a good idea to print more money in order to keep their economy from sliding into a depression. But as we just talked about, this led to higher prices, leading Zimbabwe to print even more money, which they thought would fix the problem. They even started creating higher denomination bills and adding more and more zeros in order to keep up with the rising prices, and eventually ended up with a $100 trillion bill. For some context, the US annual inflation is usually somewhere around 2%, but during this period, Zimbabwe experienced an inflation rate of 6.5 sextillion%. That number has 22 digits. Their prices doubled every 24 hours, and it got so bad that the government even made inflation or raising prices illegal, and eventually abandoned the Zimbabwe currency, and now they mostly use the US dollar instead. While this level of hyperinflation is extremely unlikely to happen here in the US, We are seeing an economic decline just like Zimbabwe did, and we are printing more and more money and taking on more debt in order to solve this problem, and we'll likely see some of the negative effects that Zimbabwe experienced in the coming years. Now, we are nowhere close to that level of inflation, and I definitely don't think we will be seeing a $100 trillion bill anytime soon, but the US debt is already a pretty scary number and will only increase as these multi-trillion dollar bills are passed. Again, I'm not trying to take any side, but I'm sure some of you are asking, why does the debt number even matter? And honestly, I used to ask that question myself. I mean, it seems like that number continues to rise with little to no consequence. Well, despite what most people think, the US debt is not mostly owned by China. In fact, a large majority of it is owned by the US itself and by US citizens in the form of treasury bonds. But the $24 trillion number that we always hear about is really not what is important in this conversation. Instead, it is the debt to GDP ratio that is important. If you don't know, the GDP, or gross domestic product, is a way of measuring the total output of an economy and is typically viewed as a good indicator of an economy's health and growth over a given period of time. However, the World Bank has studied hundreds and hundreds of economies throughout history and has determined that if the debt to GDP ratio goes above 77%, it can have serious damaging effects on an economy and really slow its ability to grow. Currently, the US debt to GDP ratio is roughly 117%, meaning our debt is actually higher than the total output of everything our country produces for a full year. Okay, but why does this matter? Well, like I said, this can drastically decrease an economy's ability to create new jobs, create more wealth, and benefit the American citizens as a whole. And if you look at this on a micro scale, it actually makes a lot of sense. If you yourself went out and got a car loan, got a mortgage, racked up a bunch of credit card debt, and then had student loans, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for you to build your wealth. And a large national economy is really no different. When our debt balloons far past our ability to generate income, it becomes very difficult for our economy to grow, meaning fewer jobs, less wealth for everyone to go around, and an overall slowing of our economy. So let's say that hypothetically, for every $10 you pay in taxes, $1 of that goes towards interest towards our national debt. Well, if the debt continues to rise, then next year, $2 for every $10 of taxes would have to go towards the debt. Fast forward another year, then the debt goes up higher, and now $5 for every $10 of taxes goes towards the national debt. And very quickly, a country can lose its ability to support its most basic functions and programs, since more and more tax revenue is going towards paying off these debts, rather than going towards building new infrastructure, fixing our roads, improving our schools, and paying the millions of government workers who rely on this income to live. And again, this type of thing happens a lot more often than you would like to think. There are countless examples of countries' debt getting out of hand throughout history, and even countries like Greece that are experiencing this exact problem right now. Okay, but let's flip this around really quick, because I don't want to just create one side of the argument, since there are some very valid arguments on the other side. A lot of times people will say that the cost of debt has gone down significantly, especially when compared to the 1980s when interest rates were significantly higher. And even just when compared to our current situation, obviously interest rates are significantly lower right now, meaning that debt is less expensive, and therefore taking on debt can be more justifiable. And the other argument that is more common and valid, if you ask me, is that you have to look at a country's situation and decide if taking on more debt is necessary in order to stop greater damage from happening. And we've talked about this topic several times on the channel, but in a nutshell, there are many who would argue that the economic damage caused by taking on more debt and printing more money is worth it in order to save families, small businesses, and states from crumbling financially. And honestly, that is by far the best argument and will largely be used by Democrats as they push for more stimulus checks in the coming weeks. Like I said in my last video, at this point, it's a matter of picking the option that causes the least amount of damage and the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people, as utilitarian as that may sound. The current health crisis is going to damage our economy in some way, and the sooner our politicians and policymakers come to terms with that, the sooner they'll be able to make a clear and decisive decision on what is best for the American people right now. So as always, I'm really curious what all of you think of this, since I know this can be a pretty polarizing topic. Obviously, you have the individuals who believe that taking on more debt is too damaging to the economy, while others believe that it is necessary in order to keep our economy out of an extended depression. So be sure to let me know down in the comment section below what you think of all of this, and regardless of which side you fall on, I hope that at the very least you can understand where the other side is coming from, since I think that respectful and open conversation is something that we really need a lot more of, especially from our leaders in Washington. With that being said, don't forget to get your 2 free stocks from Webull using the first link in the description, one of which is worth up to $1,400. It literally takes 5 minutes to sign up, and it will get you 2 free stocks, so be sure to take advantage of that first link in the description. If you did enjoy today's video, be sure to hit the like button, since this one did take a lot more time and research, and of course subscribe for more stimulus updates and more tips on your personal finances every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I seriously appreciate your time so much as always, so take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.